I feel like we could talk about the zombie kiss of death all day because that was just terrible.
I've got the episode up now, so we can kind of follow along. So why don't you go ahead and get us started here?
Okay. I just, act like I just finished drinking water.
Did you spill it on yourself again?
No, I did not. I did not. I did not. But I finished it because I thought it would be better to do it before we started. But um,
But now you're thirsty.
now I'm kind of parched.
There's just
Well,
no winning.
anyway, welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast. If we put that in there, I don't know. That's up to our editing crew, who we pay a lot of money to,
They
right?
receive no money because it's me, and that's
Oh,
and
oh.
that's why I am late on it. If you start paying me, I might start making deadlines.
Hey, well, nobody's paying me for getting clips.
That's true.
Hmm.
We're doing this out of the goodness of our heart because
That's right.
we like video games and we like
That's
entertainment.
right, everybody. We love video games. We love talking about them. Anyway, we just got done watching episode 2 of the Last of Us series titled Infected. So, I
What was
guess
the
we will
last
just hop
episode
into it.
called?
So, the last episode was called When You're Lost in the Darkness.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
Kind of a plug for the Fireflies. But not really, because they said when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. That's what they say. But not in that one, because there's no light in it, episode 1, evidently.
Hmm. It was
Brutal.
sad.
It was pretty sad. All right, so let's just hop right into it with the beginning. I want to hear your thoughts on the whole Jakarta, Indonesia thing. 2 days before
Yeah.
the outbreak in the United States.
Oh, was it 2 days?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
date of the outbreak is September 26th, and this, with the time when the professor lady goes and inspects, it was September 24th.
So this is once again the kind of stuff that I was interested in the show actually going into. One of the
Mm.
things that the game does, and I don't have a problem with it, but from the game's focus is 100% what's going on in Joel's life
Mm-hmm.
and how the outbreak started, and even whether a cure is being worked on is, of no consequence to him until he meets Ellie. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're kind of able to see the world from the perspective of one guy where, there is no rhyme or reason. This is just life now. Like, what can you do?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the series is able to kind of go into these other things. We had a cool opening in the last episode too, where there was like the theoretics of, the dangers of this like fungus that could happen, from these like mycologists, I think.
Yeah.
So in this one, I thought it was cool. I am not a microbiologist, but I did take microbiology in college. I really enjoyed the class, and so there was a few things I was able to pick up on in this episode. So I was pretty into that, like the science behind like what could be going on here, and it was still vague. We're still not getting a for sure this is why this happened, but we're getting a
Mm-hmm.
little closer to explanations. And I thought the autopsy scene was cool. It was
Mm-hmm.
interesting that this mycologist was just like, "You gotta bomb the place. There's nothing that can be
Yeah.
done." Um,
Mm-hmm.
well, how do you feel about the fungal threads coming out of people's mouths?
Well, that's exactly what I was actually gonna have. Like I have here in my notes. I said stuff coming from the mouth of the woman.
Because when we
That
saw
was
that in episode 1 with the old lady,
yeah.
uh, I was pretty sure that was fungus, but I was also like, is she eating the lady's hair? Is that what I'm
I thought
looking
the
at
same thing
right
too. I thought, yeah, I was like, man, she's getting a whole mouthful of hair, I guess.
now?
I didn't really think anything of, some fungus coming out. So yeah, when she pulled it out, I was like, oh man, what? And it was weird. Um, yeah, that was weird. I don't know. I guess I didn't read the subtitles, so I didn't understand. So I was like, wow, what's going on here?
No, I
Um,
gotta check. You did have subtitles on, right?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
did. Well, no, they automatically come on right there, so
Yeah, you
I don't
like
have them when
turn
I
them
watch
off
the
and
whole show,
guess.
but I'd be like, I don't need this.
I think she's curing it
Um,
right now.
oh yeah, she's not dead. Um, so yeah, it was interesting how she said like the whole um bomb the city, and I like how they put that in Boston because I know they talk about bombing the city in like Boston in the game, like oh, this is where it's bombed. They even have that quote later in the episode. But I didn't really put that together until they actually were in Boston. Like, oh yeah, some they bombed it a lot of major cities, and I was like, oh snap. So did like she get the word out? We need a bomb, or they bomb, and they're like, we need to do what they're doing. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. Um, last week I brought up uh how unprepared the quarantine zones like staff seem to be as far as like PPE, like personal protection equipment, like what is protecting you
Yeah.
from the actual disease.
Uh-huh.
Remember that it's like bare hand just like messing with like the cut, I think the bite mark on the kid's leg. At least I think it was. I'd have to go back and look at that. This lady was prepared this time. Full
Oh
on
yeah, no, the Asians
hazmat
don't mess
suit.
around.
Nope. Don't mess
Like, well,
around.
yeah, the thing is, like, she has no idea what she's getting into, right? So she prepares. So I mean, you could make the argument either way, like, oh, in the Boston QZ, they kind of know, maybe they know more, they don't need that stuff. Um, but then like, or maybe you could say, oh, because we don't really know, it doesn't really matter. But she was like, no, we're going in, and like, I'm wearing everything.
Which we'll get in more to this later, but just to briefly touch on
Yeah.
it, I think watching last episode and seeing the way they were kind of casually messing with this infected kid, I was like, based on the game, I was like, what is wrong with you? Based on the this episode and the behind the scenes afterwards, things are different in the show. Quite different
Yes.
actually than the game.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I guess that's kind of our explanation for now, but we'll get into that later.
Yes, I was going to mention that. That we can get in that later. So when we first see, uh, the gang, Joel, Ellie, and Tess in this episode, Ellie wakes up and they're just watching her sleep, and they won't let her near, and they're kind of like testing her in a way. Um, which you don't do that in the game, right? You don't even really sleep. You just break out of the QZ and you go.
Mhm.
Right? They split their kind of thing, get into the Capitol building into like 2 days instead of just like the one night, like in the game. Um, so I thought that was kind of interesting that I mean, they're still more skeptical in the game, like especially Joel, right? But in the show, they're really like, no, you stay away, we're gonna kill you, kind of deal. In the game, they're just like, all right, let's leave, like we gotta run,
Mhm.
right? So, and then she had a chicken sandwich,
She
so that's
did have a
great for
chicken
her.
sandwich, and they wouldn't give her a gun, so she threatened to throw the chicken sandwich at somebody.
Can I have a gun?
Absolutely not.
Fine, I'll just throw a sandwich at them.
Yeah,
There
she
were a
said, oh
couple
man, I'll choose
parts.
my sandwich.
Last episode, I was very unsure about her as Ellie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm getting a little more Ellie now in this episode. There
Yeah,
were
I
a
could see that, but
couple.
I was gonna say, yeah, I could see that, but then in a way, I was kind of like still like I feel like I don't know about her as Ellie, man, because we talked about last time, but you just can't compare with Ashley Johnson.
Yeah, it's an unfair battle for sure. Like the part when she's kind of pretending to be at like the hotel
Mm-hmm.
and she's like dinging the bell and like starts like talking like everybody, like that felt very Ellie to me.
Yes.
Um, and I think like the fine, I'll throw a chicken sandwich at them. Like that was a Ellie, like a very Ellie line. But
Yeah.
then it's a scene in the trailer that was in this episode where she's like, if she starts twitching and she starts pretending to twitch, and like, don't do that. And she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Like that's not Ellie to me. That's not. That
Yeah.
that
I
always was
yeah.
kind of cringy to me when I saw the trailer.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Um. So going back to what you said about the hotel. Well, first of all, I mean, I've never been to Boston. I actually will be going in like a month or so.
What you going for?
But
Baseball?
no, I'm going for a hockey tournament.
Oh, really?
Me, Boston. I haven't been there, but I think it looked great. From what I've in comparison to the game. We talked about the Leaning Tower or of
Yeah.
Pisa. You know, on top of each other and everything. I thought it looked really cool. But when you mentioned the hotel, like as soon as they walked in and it was like flooded and you had like, everything, I was like, this isn't Boston. I want how they'll do it in, future episodes. But like when you're in the hotel in the game and it looks exactly like that, you are in Pittsburgh and not Boston.
Oh,
So
really?
for me, yeah. So for me, I didn't like that. I was like, wait a second. This is, straight out from the Pittsburgh, part of the game, not the Boston. You don't go through the hotel. You like Ellie does that stuff where she rings the bell and plays with it, but you're in Pittsburgh, right? And
Mm,
so when they're going through, they're like, "Oh, do we go long way or shortcut? We got a long way so we won't die." So then stuff are blocked, so they kind of go through stuff, which you kind of do. Like, so in the game, the first time you kind of fight with infected by your own after you escape the government, you go through like a work office building, right? There's a bunch of
mhm.
computers
Mhm.
and stuff like that. But they went to the hotel, so
Hmm.
for me, I was like, what? You're a little too early. Did you forget your own game? But
Now,
whatever.
does the hotel look exactly like that?
Yeah, from what I remember, it looks very, very similar.
Interesting. So,
Yeah.
well, if we haven't had our spoiler warning yet, here's the spoiler warning. But
The spoiler warning was in the first episode, and we should have told you it goes through every episode because obviously.
but in the game, does Tess die in Pittsburgh then?
No, she dies in
She
Boston.
does die in Boston. So
So the
they don't
only
go to the
thing,
hotel until after Tess dies.
yeah, the only thing that like in this episode, well, there's multiple things different, right? But
Hmm.
as far as like the landscape and everything was they go to a hotel like in show in Boston, but they actually do that in Pittsburgh because that's when he goes up and they're going to the elevator and they get separated and that whole thing goes on,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do in future episodes. But that was one thing that I kind of noticed. I was like, wait, what?
Okay. Which
Yeah.
you kind of already said it, but the set design was fantastic in this episode.
Yes.
100%. Like it was the set design, and we'll get to costumes, but they were spot on. It looked like a high budget fan made film,
Mm-hmm.
and it looked straight out of the game, like all of these shots and stuff like that. So after
I'll look back
that,
at it.
we do go into the museum you were talking about. It's flooded. Ellie can't swim or walk in knee-high water.
Yeah, I liked that. That was pretty funny.
Dude, how about the
Um,
highlight of this show? The frog playing the piano. Let's go.
That was okay. Yeah, I actually, I almost put that in my notes, but I decided not to. But I still remember it. When that happened, I was like, that was dope. Something that I thought was interesting. Well, they kept on going back to Joel's hand, like, and they even mentioned like it might have a hairline fracture,
Yes.
which, um, you don't have that in the game because obviously he didn't beat up those people in the game
No,
like he did that guy. I
he
mean, he beats
shot
up
him,
plenty
right?
of people. Right? Yeah, he shot him. He beats up plenty of people. Like, when I play, I'm not trying to use ammo whatsoever. So I'm just spamming square,
Right.
right?
Right.
Just pop, 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 right? I don't know. It's kind of interesting that, like, is that going to come back to bite him in the butt or the hand? I don't know. And another thing, when Tess leaves and, Joel and Ellie finally are alone, well, again, because they were alone in their little safe house. But um, something that I like kind of made myself laugh was when Ellie's messing around with her switchblade
Hmm.
and Joel says, "Nice knife." And I'm like, "Yeah, I wish you had that, not stupid shivs."
Cause
Right?
in
Like,
in part two, do you have unlimited shivs because of her knife?
yeah, you don't even have shivs. Like, you just use like her
You just
knife.
use her knife, right? Okay.
So I was like, because that would be so nice when I can just take out these clickers, but instead I gotta, just sneak around them because
Right.
I gotta save my shivs for, locked doors or
Oh, that's right. The
whatever.
locked doors too. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because you always gotta save them for at least clickers. But then, yeah, locked
yeah,
doors as well
like
because you gotta go and
like
find
you save
Abby's
them for
dad's
locked
coins.
doors, and then I use them. Oh yeah, because you gotta get those coins. And then for clickers, like in case of emergency, I usually try and stealth my way around them or kill them in a different way with like a brick or something. But
Mm,
depends on how many resources you have.
right.
But I was like, yeah, you know what, Joel, why can't you have a dang knife? But
He's got just about everything else, just no knife. Simply
no knife.
to make the game more difficult.
Something I liked, about when they were in the museum and they're like, oh shoot, that thing got ripped apart. Like Ellie's like, I've been attacked. I've seen people attacked.
Hold on,
That
can
is
I?
not what they look like. And like they did a really good job of like putting the fear of a clicker,
They did.
right? In
Yes.
the game, they're like, oh shoot, that's a clicker. You gotta be quiet. And like obviously you're kind of afraid when it's the first time you see it. But in
Hmm.
this one, they were like terrified,
Yeah.
which I loved.
Like Joel's line was really good where he says, "From here on out, we are silent, not quiet, silent." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh boy, yeah." And like even hear Tess say, "Like we don't hear them. They
Yeah.
don't hear the clickers right now." Which, if you've played the games, you know exactly what she's talking about. And if you're first time to
Yeah.
the show, you're probably getting pretty nervous right now because the clickers
Which
are something
that
else. That's one of the best designed enemies, period, in
yeah.
a game.
Yeah. Like that's something that I liked when they talked about behind the scenes with the clickers. The guy was talking about, when the first time you see the clickers in the show, like if you've played the game, you're like, they got it. That's spot on. But if you've
Hmm.
never played the game, you're like, holy
Oh no.
crap, what is that?
Right.
Right.
And the
So
clickers
yeah,
in the
I think they did a good job.
and the clickers in the games, they ride that fine line where, as like a game developer, you want your characters to be like your creatures, your enemies, whatever, to be scary. And so
Hmm.
first is the art design, you know? How does this thing look?
Yeah.
Is it scary at all? The second, to me, is how easy is it to kill? Because
Hmm.
if you make something super scary, which I can't think of any examples off the top of my head right now, but if you make something super
That's
scary,
scarier than Clipper? I don't even know. Maybe, um, uh, Graham.
Graham. Maybe Graham. But, if you make something really scary, but then it's really easy to kill, it kind of loses that
Mhm.
fear, you know?
Yeah.
Like the really good artwork is half the battle on that, I think. But then there's some things that are scary because they're so difficult to kill. I brought this up last week, but like in Resident Evil 2, there's a guy who will just follow you around and you can't kill him. There's like
Hmm.
later on in the game where you actually have boss fights against him, uh, but you you can't kill this guy, you know? And that's what particularly makes him terrifying is that all I can do is run. But
Yeah.
the clickers are killable, but they're still very difficult. It's
Yeah.
kind of the same thing with a lot of enemies in Dark Souls. Dark Souls has, and like all the From Software games that are Souls-like, have fantastic artwork design for these enemies, but they're usually also really difficult to beat, and that's the other thing that's makes them scary in that sense. And so
Hmm.
so clickers are scary, and I think they're perfectly balanced in that sense.
Yeah. I totally agree. Um,
So before we talk about too much about the clickers, I want to talk
yeah.
about because I want to talk about the museum scene. It's a good scene that we should talk about. But right
Yeah.
before that, we they stand on the balcony of that building and they see all the infected kind of writhing on the ground.
Yeah.
And
They're doing the
we
boogie or something.
they're doing the boogie.
They were like, doing the worm boogie.
Yeah, they
You
were
know,
doing the
they
worm.
all they did like the worm and then they rolled over and they just kind of did it in like a line. It was like a wave, just worm boogie.
Now, can you re-explain to me, does sunlight affect any of the infected?
No, so sunlight nor like your flashlight.
So
So
what about clickers? Because you don't ever see a clicker outside, really, do you?
yes, you do. So at Bill's place, they're outside.
Ah,
But
yes,
actually,
you're right.
now that you mentioned the light, I want to say, oh man, I always forgot their name. In part two, the Shimmers,
Shamblers, right? Are they
Ramblers. Yeah,
Shamblers?
I want to
We'll double check.
say
We'll both be wrong.
they can't be in light. Yeah, not Shimmer because that doesn't sound scary at all. But Shambler, I think
Shambler
that's
might be a D&D thing though, so I can't remember exactly what they're called.
it. I want to say that they get affected by light. Like they kind of like writhe in a way like when something happens to them, they kind of like give off stuff. So I want to say that is true. But you know what? We're not. They're not in the series right now, so we don't have to talk about them. But
But
in
do we usually find the more progressively infected, like the clickers, inside because like fungus thrives in dark, damp places? Is that the
that could
reasoning
be
behind that?
a reason, but I want to say the big reason is that like most people are outside, when they're traveling, so they'll take out the infected because it's not always about the most if there's a lot of, fungus around them or fungi or whatever, it's more of like the aging process, right? So you're runners and at the stage one and you do that for a bit, right? I can't remember. I think I saw like this whole thing. I had like, the weeks and the years. But so you start as that and then you go to a stalker to where you get more of that fungal armor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're stronger, and then but you kind of hide, like you're not like runners that just chase them after. You kind of stalk them and attack them like silent or quietly in a way.
Okay.
And then stage three is your clicker, and that's when you have enough fungal shield and protection, like those plates that that comes out of your face. That's why they're blind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they use that clicking, and then it goes up, and on and on and on.
Now, after being a clicker, is that when you become part of the ship, part of the crew?
Part of the crew.
Like Davy Jones's ship, like Will Turner's dad, like gets stuck to the wall.
Yeah, yeah, I guess Um, yeah, I would say that. I'd say so.
So a bloater would be a clicker that never got around to stick into a wall then, is that right?
Well, not exactly because I think the bloaters are. I mean, I guess. But when in Bill's place, when you first see a bloater, he is like in that little thing where it's just a bunch of fungi, and you can't really tell if he's stuck to the wall. But they were strong enough that they could kind of get out of it. But I
Hmm.
want to say the only like
Was it an infected
infected
lineman?
that are yeah, right.
Now, the infected generally, there's a few parts in the game, and maybe you can sound off a few parts off the top of your head, but I know there's a few parts where it's just like there's a lot of infected right now.
Uh-huh.
I feel like there's even some parts where all you can do is run. I know the
Yeah.
beginning of part two deals with that, where like all you
Hmm.
can do is like run in this case. I don't remember a ton of those parts in part one, but looking at this shot where Ellie's looking over the balcony and she sees like the whole horde down there, it looks more like Days Gone or World War Z than it does Last of Us to me.
I would agree. Yeah, I because in the game you see a bunch of them, right? When you're in Pittsburgh, with Sam, there's a part where you have to run, right? But it's kind of like you
Is
still
that
fight a
running
bunch of them.
from hordes or is that running from military?
That's from you do it in both ways, right? It's when you sneak it, you're going through that neighborhood thing, and
That's
then you sneak
right.
into that.
With the sniper?
Yeah, just before the sniper.
Okay.
Well, yeah, actually, no, that too, yeah, because then a bunch of them come because they hear all that noise.
That's
But you go
right.
through that building, and then once you leave, it says like, don't go inside, infected, and you're like, why didn't you put? And then Ellie's like, oh, why didn't you put that on the other side, right? So there's a part in that where you just like run.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I totally agree. It was definitely more. World War Z, which we mentioned last episode with how fast Grandma and that one guy in the kitchen was running. That was ridiculous,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So,
So let's
because
talk about. Oh, go ahead. If you're not done with your point yet.
well, I was gonna say because World War Z, they're like freaky fast delivery, Jimmy John style
And they like
zombies.
make like a human ladder to like climb up
Yeah,
things.
right. And then in The Last of Us, the runners, they're still basically humans in a way, right? So they don't get super speed. Like they're still just normal speed people, well, infected. But
Hmm.
yeah, they're not, you know, Usain Bolt zombies.
Right. Now that would be a scary infected.
That would be.
Like you're running away from a horde and then they're right in the front. Is Usain Bolt.
Just like, we
Oh
got them, don't
crap.
worry, boys. And they just
I think we can outrun them guys. Then just here he comes like nope, we can't. Let's talk about the hive mind.
okay.
What do you think?
What the what?
So kind of like, it's got its like the hive mind is technically from D&D,
Oh
but
yeah, because when you said that I thought of like Stranger Things.
exactly. But
So I was kind of like, wait,
we basically have that here now.
yes. The whole fungus growing in the ground thing,
Which is not in the game, correct?
which is not in the game.
Like
Yeah, when they were
fungus
talking
is
about
on
that,
the
I was like,
walls and stuff like that. Like the set design where you see the fungus is still spot on, like what's on the doors of the museum and
yes,
stuff. But there's no place in the game where it's like don't step on that.
yeah. Thankfully, no, because that would just be terrible. If if they did that in the game, then you better be giving Joel a knife
Press X to tiptoe.
because yeah, I mean you have to be quiet and slow with the clickers, but yeah, so that was interesting because I noticed like they had that that stringy stuff growing around his fingers, same stuff that they pulled out of that mouth,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I thought that was interesting, and
Yeah, the
then
neighbor's hair is everywhere in this city.
yeah, like she was from Texas, man. Like I don't
It's just all
I
over the
don't know what
place.
happened. Um, yeah, so that was very interesting, which I'm glad they explained more of that in the behind the scenes deal because we talked about it last time how important of a scene it is later when after tests and everything when Joel and Ellie are just running from Fedra is that they go down to the spores and Joel has a mask and he says how are you not how are you breathing,
Hmm.
right? And we talked about how important that was to showing that like this isn't a joke, Joel, you got to believe it, kind of deal. And so I remember we talked about what are they going to do because that should be in the next episode. Well, I guess it would be technically episode 3 now,
Hmm.
but um, yeah, so spores don't exist in the show,
I'm a little
which is
bummed.
interesting.
I'm a little bummed, but
Yeah.
this is the kind of situation you get in when you make these kinds of adaptations. Is there's going to be stuff you're going to have to change, and there's going to be stuff that's going to
Uh-huh.
stay accurate. If you just did a shot-for-shot remake of the entire show, why are we doing this in the first place?
Yeah.
And one of the things they say in like these bonus features and stuff is that some stuff that works well in a game does not work in a movie. I get that, and I
Hmm.
respect that. But some of the stuff that you have to change for the movie might not hit the way it did in the video game. And for that, I'm gonna
Yes.
say that sounds like a miss. It's better in the game. Like the whole sports thing, that's a huge part when Ellie's not wearing a mask, and it goes on to be a huge thing with her throughout the series. Uh,
Yeah.
it also, to me, added a bit more personality to this zombie universe because traditionally,
Hmm.
like you're like Resident Evil ones or whatever, they're just gonna bite you. I can't think of
Yeah.
any other ways. Maybe there are some ways that you can also get infected in Resident Evil, but I think it's just like you get bit by a zombie in the traditional sense. In these, it's like no, there's like a fungus and you could breathe it in and become an infected as well. Like that to me was just interesting and it added a little more like a unique flair to this. And I
Yeah.
don't think that the hive mind kind of a thing is it works for me quite the same way as like well they do this now instead.
Yeah, because it would sometimes just be better to just kind of take that out completely. Because now it's like, is there going to be some time in future episodes when they just randomly step on a thing, right?
Right.
Or do
Right.
we have to see them kind of, hopping around, be like, all right, don't step on that kind of deal?
Well, because just to test out the thing, Joel poked it.
Yeah.
Like the
And he said it's
old
dry.
rotten one's like, it's dry. Well, good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
You really
Way to use your head there, buddy.
really rolled the dice on that one, Joel.
Yeah. So, yeah. And looking ahead, if they end up doing part two as a series, it'll be interesting because the way that Dina finds out about Ellie's condition is that Ellie's mask breaks, right? And Dina's about to take hers off and give it to Ellie, and she's like, "No, no, no, it's fine. I'm immune."
That's
Right.
right. That's
So
right.
that'll be interesting to see what they do in the future. If because that's how she finds out is the spores. So how do you make that work? And with what Ellie accidentally steps on a vine and goes, "Just kidding, I'm immune." I don't know.
So museum scene. I think it's my favorite scene so far in the show.
Yeah.
It was it I thought the set design was spot on. It had
Hmm.
that creepy dark look, the kind that I was telling you like when I was first playing this in my apartment. I had like a glare on my screen, I couldn't see anything. Like that's the kind of the real scary, stealthy, dark parts of the game. Like
Yeah.
that's one of the highlights of like the gameplay of everything for me in The Last of Us.
Hmm.
Um, and like you said before, the anticipation of the clickers was really really good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about clickers.
Well, I something I really liked, which I noticed it before the guy talked about in behind the scenes, but like their choreography was great. Like the sound, well, obviously they're using the same sounds, but even when they make certain sounds, like they have tiny ear clicks when you're walking around, but then they'll like punch over, throw their arms back, and like yell, right? And they did that perfectly. They do that in the game, and they did it like the exact same way in the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah. Was that you in the suit?
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
said they got a
A
bunch of
little plug.
fans, so wasn't
Yeah,
sure if maybe that was you.
I was telling people that I actually went to Honduras for 2 years, but I was actually just being a clicker.
You're
So
just acting like a clicker.
yeah,
So where do you go
that's
from
that's
here, acting wise? Is anyone else hiring
I'm
for clickers?
you know that's why I'm hoping part two, and then turns it out and they give me a call back. I wanted to be the bloater in the high school, but I'm too tiny. Um,
Yeah, they would have to
but
tape like four guys to you to make you be a bloater.
yeah, like 5'7", skin and bones just doesn't
Just put you in like a sumo
work.
suit and just try to make sure you don't bounce too much so they don't see it's like a hollow belly.
Yeah, right.
So clickers, it was good. It was good,
Yeah,
and
it was spot on.
they showed the clickers in the trailer, and that was one
Hmm.
of the things that got me excited for the show. There were some things in the
Yeah,
trailer I was like, I don't know about that. They really sound like Joel and Ellie to me and stuff. We'll just see. Clickers though, watching Pedro Pascal hiding in the museum as they're like making their noises and walking on the other side of the glass, that was always great, and I
yeah,
was always excited to see that part of it.
yeah. I was too when I saw that part because the museum part has always been one of my favorites.
Now that is the
Um,
first time you see a clicker in game too. Is that right?
yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, kind of no. The first time you see it is when you're in that work office building, right?
Oh, okay.
Before, so that's technically before, but it is like that same, part,
Okay. Now
So
here's a question for you before we move on. Knowing point A to point B of where the story is, having played the game, you know?
Hmm.
Did you feel like we didn't cover a whole lot of ground in this episode?
Covered nothing.
It
Um,
really was kind of like story wise, this was like maybe like two cutscenes worth.
yeah, yeah, exactly. There's because the cutscenes that are in that that they have acted out that you can watch on YouTube or whatever
Mm-hmm.
is when they get on that wooden plank and Joel asks Ellie, is this everything you hope for? And she says, jury's still out, but you can't deny that view.
Mm.
That cutscene and Tess's, last goodbye.
And
That's it.
that's word for word though, with the you can't deny that view.
So is that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
Yeah, that was word for word.
Okay, I'll have to see that cutscene again.
And I guess, I mean, they'd spent, I don't know how long it was, but they spent like, a good amount of time in that Indonesia place,
They did.
right?
Actually, I can tell
They
you.
spent, yeah, how long was it? Like 15 minutes?
Yeah, the opening credits don't hit until 11 minutes and 20 seconds. So yeah,
Yes,
we
and
spent,
it's only like a 55-ish minute episode.
well, let's see, because we have our
Um,
bonus features after. So yeah, the episode itself is about 54 minutes. So we
yeah.
spent over 10 minutes on the Indonesia opening. Uh,
And then you spend like another 10 minutes as they're, Ellie has to go pee and whatever, and they're like, oh
yeah.
man, chicken sandwich, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I was to reorganize this episode, I would keep the apprehension about Ellie in there. For me, that worked, especially with how rushed her revealing that she's immune in the last episode compared to the game. I think I
Mm-hmm.
would keep it here because it was kind of cool to end on that note and then come back and they're like, all right, it's time to talk. You know?
Yeah.
I would cut down the Indonesia stuff. It was good, but you probably could have cut out the first 2 minutes of them picking her up at lunch and then just have her in the car. And they're like, sorry, we had to pick you up. Like you get that from context. And then
Yeah.
just have her doing the autopsy. And I don't know. It's hard because the Indonesia scene was really good. I really did enjoy it.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen them maybe make it to Bills in this episode, but I also understand that you're trying to end on the note of Tess's death.
Yeah.
But
That's what, yeah. I
I,
knew that Tess was going to die, like that episode. Like, I texted you, you asked me, does Tess die after Bills or what? And I said, no, she should die this episode. If not, they're really dragging it out. And well, they basically were dragging it out. I mean, in game, that part isn't very long. I mean, it could take you a while because you do have to fight a lot of, it could probably be like an hour, maybe an hour and a half of gameplay
mhm.
because you have to go through the whole work office building, take down all of the, infected in there. And then you go to the museum, and then you don't have to take out all the infected. You can sneak by them if you'd like. Um, and then, you go, and that's that. So, yeah, as far as gameplay, they took out a big chunk of what you would play because we don't need to see Joel going
Mhm.
through the office building, taking down
It's like
all
10
these
minutes of
zombies.
him rummaging for like scissors and band-aids.
Yeah, right. It's like that one candy bar that's there, and he gets a little sliver of health. Um,
Yes, 20-year-old candy bar. Go ahead and eat that, Joel.
yeah,
If anything, it's gonna take health
nougat.
away from you.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, yeah, it didn't. I mean, first episode was like 30 minutes longer, but
Yeah,
I feel like they did cover a lot more,
they did.
right?
Now, how about Ellie getting bit again?
Yeah, I was going to mention that up. That was, that's not in the game. That was kind of weird to me. Um, but I kind of see why they did it because, like I was talking about earlier, they don't have the spores to like show Joel again, like, hey, this is, real. Which in the game, when Tess is about to die, right, and she's comparing the bites, she just uses her old one, right? And it makes a good point, like this is 3 weeks, and this was
Mhm.
an hour, like it's already way worse than this 3 week bite.
Mhm.
But in this one, they were like, we got bit at the same time. Hers isn't doing like anything. It's just like a little cut basically, and mine's, I'm already growing fungus out of me. So I see why they did it. Did they have to? No.
I agree. I can also see why they were trying to draw a comparison of them being bit at the same time, but I think it
Hmm.
was kind of dumb. I think
Yeah.
that you just telling me already that her bite is 3 weeks old is already like enough. You know what I mean? Like even without the
Hmm.
spores, like we get it as an audience. And so
Yeah.
it seemed unnecessary, and it also just seems like Ellie's just like accident prone at this point. Like she's just gonna get how many more times is she gonna get bit before this season's over?
Yeah, right. Because she's like, "Oh, look at me." And well, of course it was me, right? No, no hard feelings or whatever.
Then everyone play the game
Right.
for like
And
nope.
yeah. Well, and imagine being tested in that moment, being like, "Uh-huh, yeah,
Right.
no hard feelings."
So, do you have
Which,
anything? Oh, go ahead.
well, I was gonna move on talking about tests after that.
Yeah.
Um, I did like her attitude change. They had like it's very similar to the game where you know Joel well, it's kind of interesting because it was Joel that was like, "Hey, let's move, let's move, let's move." But then a lot of parts in the game, it's Tess like, "Hey, let's move, right? Let's get this done," even all the way up to the end. Especially when she kind of is like, "Hey, let's move, let's get it done." But then in the game, she does have the attitude change when she knows she's gonna die. She's like, "Hey, yo, like, stay focused. Let's get this done," right?
Mhm.
Because she doesn't want to turn on him in the open.
Mhm.
Um, so I did like how they had that kind of attitude change with Tess.
Let's talk about Tess's death scene.
Yes. So um, so I guess back onto that hive mind thing. We'll see how if it plays out in the show, in the future. But I guess if you take out spores, you don't have government. You had to have an an honorable way for Tess to go,
Mhm.
right? So I guess they could see that was kind of their way. I feel like her way of fighting off the government was better for sure because she's like, I'll fight them off, like I'll take them out and give you time.
Mhm.
But she knew she was gonna die anyway. I don't know. I mean, obviously that was the original too, and the whole. I'm still. Can we just talk about
The
the weird?
the zombie kiss of death.
Yes, dude. What the heck was that? Like, so they're all running past, which makes sense. But then, like in the game, if a runner notices you, it doesn't just walk up to you and give you a smooch. It runs. They're called runners, right? A whole horde
Mhm.
would have just. So I was thinking, was he not swarming her because she's already infected and they can tell?
Maybe an interesting
And
theory.
that's why he wanted to make little zombie babies. I don't know,
Everyone's running, that this one
right? Like,
stopped. That to me, all the nitpicking and stuff like that up to this point, it's been a little nitpicking. The show's fine. You know what I mean? Like the show, if you
yeah.
if you haven't played the games, you're probably really enjoying the show. If you had played the
Oh yeah.
games, you're probably still enjoying the show. But this was stupid. What a stupid scene.
Dude, like, I just don't understand
I
the
was
whole.
I was trying to watch the bonus features. Explain yourselves.
Yeah, which I can't even imagine um getting like those fibers just forced down my throat, dude.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, I know Tess, she wanted to, she was trying to get that lighter to go forever,
Mhm.
right? But there's no, like, she was spamming that thing right at that moment because
Just shoot a
that was,
grenade. There's like 12 of them
right?
on the
That's
ground.
what I was thinking.
If you
I was
miss
thinking that
one,
too.
shoot the other one.
Yeah, because, yeah, she was pushing down the barrels of oil and gas and whatever. And I thought, oh, maybe she'll light it. But then I saw these grenades. I'm like, oh, she'll just shoot them. And then she was trying to light it and it wasn't working. And then, yeah, she got the zombie kiss of death. So,
And I feel
yeah, that.
like Tess is in The Last of Us Part 1 does a really good job. The cast is really not that big, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of
Uh-huh.
reminds me of a God of War 2018, where
Yeah.
there's really not that many characters here, and because the scope of that is like so much smaller than like something like Red Dead 2, for example, which does characters really, really well, but there's a lot of them. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you ask me, I haven't played Red Dead 2 since when it came out, Uh,
Yeah.
it's fantastic, but if you were to quiz me on what's the names of all the characters in the camp, I would not pass that quiz. I would do my best. If you show me pictures, it might get a little better.
You'd
Uh,
get Lenny.
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 So like the your size, the population of your camp in Red Dead 2 is like bigger than the cast of Last of Us and God of War 2018. Probably, maybe not, but
Yeah.
both Last of Us and God of War 2018 have very few main characters, and because of that, some of these characters who aren't on screen for very long stand out. Sarah's one of them. Tess is another one. Bill is another one. And
Mm-hmm.
Tess's death stands out to you in the game. And there were parts in this one where I was like, maybe we were a little hard on Tess, saying like, oh, she's like a lot softer in the show. But you think about her death scene in the game, she just like real quick shows the bite, and she's like, you got to get out of here. Like just if there's anything here, do
Mm-hmm.
this for me. And here, one of the things that makes Tess's death so awesome is that you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You shut the door or whatever, and you hear her. You hear the gunshots go off, and you're just like, man, Tess is awesome. And having her here, I don't personally care too much if it was military or infected. I think both ways she can go out really cool. But I think it's the in not seeing it that makes it so cool. She's like, get out of here. But
Mm-hmm.
then you go in and give her the zombie kiss of death, which to me is one of the lamest ways to die. And you completely undermine all that Tess is. Like, she's still
Yeah, like,
sacrificing herself for it, but it's lame now. It's just so dumb.
well, yeah, because, you know, she might as well have been that person, um, that said I can't do it who I thought was Tess, right?
Hmm.
It might as well have been her because, yeah, I don't know. Like, I is the Tess in the show fine? Yeah, she's fine,
Sure.
right? She's got her moments, but yeah, like I said, she's weaker. I mean, in the behind the scenes, they kind of talked about how she, um, really, found some hope that was always there that she kind of forgot about when she realizes that Ellie's thing's real, which she, does show that in the game.
Hmm.
It says like, get him to or get her to Tommy's, right? But in this, she's kind of like she kind of just I don't know, cries about it.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and I certainly see. I think that if we had not really seen Tess die, let's say we start seeing the zombies come running in, and she's looking scared, which it's okay to. You're about to die, and there's all these infected in there. I don't think the
Mm-hmm.
Tess in the game would have shown any fear because she was just so freaking tough and awesome. I think
Yeah.
she still would have kept it together. It's humanizing to see her like that, but let's cut right there. Let's not show her get assaulted by this zombie and just watch the building explode. And I
Yeah.
think that we're good. You can look at it as more human, or you can look at it as she's not as tough as the video game character, but it's that zombie kiss of death that does it for me because, we brought this up last week too. Who are you making the show for? You're making it for the fans and for people who have never played the game and trying to get them interested in the story because it's really good. Do you
Yeah.
see either of these groups understanding what just happened?
No.
No. Maybe he was hiding Abby's dad's coins in her in her mouth. I don't know.
They said, "Come get him,"
Come get him. Want that platinum?
right? I don't know. Yeah, that's. I feel like we could talk about the zombie kiss of death all day because that was just terrible. In a way that, like, I don't want to, but you just could because it's just like, what the heck happened? But
Just
something I
yeah.
wanted to touch on real quick. I was about to do when I asked you if you had any extra thoughts because I was about to go into this thing. Um, In the game, she says, get Ellie to Tommy's, right? He used to run, because it's all about getting to the Fireflies.
There's enough here that you have to feel some sort of obligation to me, so you get her to Tommy's.
But in the show, she says, get her to Bill and Frank's. So, one, she's saying go to Bill's, right? Which is weird. But she puts Frank in there. I'm sure we'll talk about it, the entire episode next time. But Frank is alive. Well, I mean, in the game, Joel didn't know who Frank was. Right?
Did he not? I thought that he asked where.
No, because
That's right, because Bill has to kind of explain who he was, right?
Yeah, because when Bill sees like him, all strung up, and he's like, and Joel's like, "What? You know this guy or something?" And he's like, "Frank," and he's like, "Who's Frank?" Right? He does not care. He's like, "I don't care. Like, who is Frank?" So yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see. And they showed that like future trailer for the next episode, and they had Bill, which is
Nick Offerman. That's his name.
Yes, Nick Offerman. So, I mean, without going into too much detail, because I'm sure we'll talk about it next time. It'll be interesting to see how he does. When I didn't know he was in the show, but I think I was telling my mom, I was like, "Oh yeah, Last of Us show," and she's like, "Oh yeah, I heard like Nick Offerman's in it or something." And I'm like, "Oh, let me guess, he plays Bill," and she's like, "I think that's what I heard." She knows nothing about the game, right?
Right.
But
your mom hasn't played The
as soon as
Last
I heard
of Us? What?
What? Well, I mean, I'll just show her the kiss of death scene and be like, "This is what you're missing."
This is the most accurate scene to the game, Mom.
It made me cry, Mom. It was so beautiful. I was looking forward to this, show for this reason.
Yeah, there's some Witcher scenes. I'll pull from this prequel show. I'll send them to you. You know what? The whole prequel Blood Origin Witcher show is the equivalent of the kiss of death scene. So, anyways,
Anyway.
I know it's getting late for you. So, final thoughts on the episode.
So, yeah, final thoughts on the episode. It was good. I definitely enjoyed the first episode more.
Agreed.
Once Tess blew up, and I was wondering if it was going to be end. I wasn't looking at like the time or anything. And then like the credits happened. I was kind of like, really, that was it, right? Back to the whole they didn't progress a ton during the episode. But it's just gonna be interesting to see what happens. I mean, they did the clickers right and everything. I'll be interested to see if when Ellie finishes that chicken sandwich.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to that. One of my favorite parts was how when it kept cutting back to her, the sandwich was bit in different parts, or it was like slowly disappearing. So it was like cut to her, cut to Tess, cut back. There's less sandwich. Cut back to Tess, cut back. Like the sandwich is gone.
Yeah. My prediction is when Ellie first gets a gun, when Ellie's allowed to use the gun, is in Pittsburgh. So I don't think it'll be the next episode, but maybe episode 4. Is when Joel, first she kills the guy, right? And then they goes through and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna take them all out. You be my eyes, and if I get in any trouble, you take them out, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And she's sniping.
That's right.
I think my prediction for the show is when she's like, "Yo, give me a gun. I can handle myself." And he goes, "No, you have a chicken sandwich," and he leaves.
My prediction for the show is that the chicken sandwich is the cure, and that's why Ellie's
That's
immune.
why she's immune, because she's the only one that's had like chicken.
Yeah, well, apparently all the fireflies eat it. Have you seen any fireflies actually get infected? No, you haven't actually seen it.
That's right.
Sandwich.
The fireflies at the Capitol building just didn't have any chicken sandwiches.
If they had chicken sandwiches, they would have been okay, and they would have been there, and the show would have been over.
Yep, and we wouldn't have had the kiss of death.
No, well, that still probably would have been in it. I'm pretty sure the next episode will start off with it again, just to make sure you all saw it.
Well, yeah, probably it's gonna be like previously on The Last of Us, and it's just gonna be 5 minutes of the zombie kiss of death.
And while Last of Us Part One is very beloved, and there's really no complaints that I hear about too much, regarding the
Mhm.
first game. There's a big debate on the second game, which Neil Druckmann, was the writer and director, I believe, for both of them, and now he's involved in the show as well and directing it.
Yeah.
Unless I'm mistaken on that. And there's stuff in the second one that worked for me. There's stuff that didn't work quite as well. When I hear some complaints, I can understand them. Uh, but this one right here, now that you show me the zombie kiss of death, it's like, Neil, you go on that George Lucas route where you just start to lose your mind and like none of your stuff makes sense anymore. What's going on here? Because I, if we just never come back to this, which is probably for the best, I'm still demanding an answer for what I just saw. So overall, did you enjoy this episode?
I'll give it like a 6 out of 10
Yeah,
because
I think that's
you
fair. I
know
mean,
there were a lot of good things. Like we talked about the the way it looked, Boston, the clickers. That just carries everything.
yeah,
There
it
was
really
more
did.
Ellie moments and stuff like that. But there was still stuff that I mean, the kiss of death is what brings it down to a 6 probably.
Yeah, I would say it's the
But
kiss of death plus just the not progressing enough in the story. I think
yeah, I
that if
agree.
we had cut down on Indonesia a little bit, which I really liked, but if we're hurting for time, which we weren't in the last episode, but whatever. Uh,
Yeah, I don't know why they couldn't do like 30 minutes more, but
yeah. Um, cut down on Indonesia, and I think overall I would keep the traveling around the city stuff because it's important and it's good for the atmosphere and it's good for fans of the game to see these set
Mhm.
designs and how like accurate they were and stuff.
Yeah.
I would keep all of that, but add a little bit more. Maybe don't end the episode on Tess's death. In the game, Tess's death is not like a, oh, I can turn the game off part. It's like a, we got to get out of here, and there's still Fedra people trying to kill us. It's very much
Yeah.
like the beginning of a intense adrenaline fueled moment. And so
Hmm.
ending it on that note and then making it just freaking weird was just a weird thing to do. Like I would have thought that they would arrive at Bill's.
Yeah, that would have been a good thing. Like if you just arrived at like that city and then it ends.
Mm-hmm. Or even
That
have
would
the
have been.
part with the him upside down. And like
I
you
was thinking
see the
that same
infected
thing.
running at him and then end the episode there. Like that's a part you could end at.
Yeah, those were exactly like two parts that I was thinking of.
You're like, holy crap, he's about to get kissed by all these zombies.
Oh
He's
no.
about to get Spider-Man upside down kissed by all of them.
Oh man.
Because now I have a new joke. I'm not going to joke about Abby's dad's coins anymore. I'm going to joke about the zombie
It's
kiss of
the kiss
death.
of death.
Because it's the only thing I can think
Oh man.
about now.
My head's just gonna hit the pillow. It already happened last night, but you know, what do you think of? My head hit the pillow. Boom, zombie kiss of death. What's the first
Zombie
thing when
kiss of death.
I wake up? Boom, zombie kiss of death. I'm in class trying to focus. Boom, zombie kiss of death.
Like, stop shooting the clickers. They just want to smooch.
Well, the clickers didn't, but the
You don't
mother,
know
I guess.
that. You don't know that. You didn't give him a chance.
I mean, I guess he was yelling a lot in his face. He was like, "Come on, kiss me."
I don't know, man. I think we need to get Stephen A. Smith's take on this whole scene. He's the
Like,
one who
what
really took.
in the world was that? Yo, my goal we talked about for this podcast, we're just doing this for fun. We don't really care who or who listens. My goal is to have Stephen A. guest star on this podcast before the end of the season.
You reach for the stars. I'm just hoping to keep you on this podcast till the end.
Zombie kiss of death almost got me.
At what
No,
point?
dude, I'm here to the entire. I'm with you to the end of the line, pal.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this: if you see one more zombie kiss, are you gonna keep watching the show? If the next episode
Uh,
has a zombie kiss, are you gonna keep watching or are you gonna say I'm out?
you know, if that's how they kill off Frank, because I'm assuming Frank's gonna die, but if that's how they kill him off, I swear, bro.
Yep, I guess in the
Yeah.
end, this episode it nailed the atmosphere, it nailed the set design. There's a lot of stuff for fans to love. It got really weird, and
Yeah.
not a whole lot of story was covered in like the 45, 50 minutes of this episode.
Hmm.
So there's parts of it that felt very filler, and then parts that I'm just not quite sure what to think. So just gotta watch it for yourself and see what you think. Um, Here's hoping that the rest of the show doesn't get too weirder, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, that's our little review of the podcast today. We're giving it a 6 out of 10. We didn't really rank the first one. I'd just give it like a 9 out of 10.
That sounds good to me. Yeah,
But
I would give it like an 8 or a 9 out of 10.
well, yeah, we'll rank them. We'll start ranking them at the end of
Yeah.
each episode.
I don't know.
Um,
I'm feeling like a 6 is a little harsh. I might lean more on a 7. I think set design
all right.
saves it and
I
clicker design, you know.
Yeah.
But Zombie Kiss of Death is definitely like a -2 points. And
Yeah, that's why I was thinking -4
yeah, I
because it
mean,
was just that bad.
you're
That's why I gave it
you're probably right, and I'm just being nice.
yeah.
But yeah,
It's too nice.
somewhere between a 6 and a 7 for sure on this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what we're giving it, But yeah, anyway, so thanks for listening. If you did, Stephen A, if you listened, hit me up. Hit us up at our Twitter, whatever the one I had last time, like Bizarre at Bonafide, Last of Us series podcast by Peanut Butter Gamer or something. I don't know.
This was sponsored by Peanut
Yeah.
Butter Pops.
Peanut butter puffs. Oh man, I gotta get a shirt.
Well, we gotta
All
get a
right,
good ending.
that's the episode.
Well, goodbye.
Yeah.